Hi John, this is B.Marmion and this is my screencast for CA2. So the specification for CA2, we're required to team up with the other groups in the class and we're to share our data. Each group developed their own data in CA1. The data we shared could be anything associated with the patient in our projects, and it was very much dependent on what project each group implemented in CA1. So for our group, we implemented the child immunisation project where the number of immunisations a child would receive at different intervals, like at 1 month, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year, 13 months. They were documented and loaded into a database. And in addition to that, it was linked with the GP or the healthcare professional for that particular child, which was our patient. The presentation went through creating valid XML document, agreeing with DTD, exchanging XML documents with the other groups, the interoperability of XML and how it benefited us in this CA. We identified some opportunities for improvement which we would hope to correct for CA3, and then I'll finish off with a code demo. So the first thing we did was create a valid XML document. It's called a well-formed document, so meaning no syntax errors, everything's spell checked, it satisfied the rules laid out in the DTD, and we tried to agree this collectively with all 3 groups in the class. Although we were agreeing one document, we had to recognise that some elements were optional for different people and different groups. For example, in our case, appointments and symptoms, we weren't actually able to share them, but these weren't common to all 3 groups. But patient, healthcare professional and medications were. And within that, for example, the patient, not every patient would have a date of birth, not every patient would have perhaps an email address. Okay, so just to run over the what a well-formed and valid XML document would need. So the elements are, XML supports 2 types of elements. There are closed and empty, as demonstrated here in the symptoms example on screen. As I said before, element names are case sensitive, so no syntax errors, and if you have a capital S in an opening element, the closing element must have a capital S to match. Elements must be nested correctly, so as you can see, you've got your root there as symptoms, and then your parent element as symptoms. Within this you have symptom, and then you have the elements such as symptom name. That's a small example, but say for patient you could have date of birth, first name, last name, address. And we weren't using attributes for this, we're just using elements. Again, there can only be one root element. For the DTD, we agreed that was the patient element. So, agreeing with DTD, Kira and I took leadership of this for our group, and we coordinated on behalf of the class, really, because we took over the distribution of the DTD as it evolved with each iteration. So in November, at the beginning of November, we sat down together to decide on what data we would share across the applications and what format this would be. The output of the meeting was an XML DTD, and the documents, this would be the roadmap for which each group would input their data into, and they would follow this. So this was just a quick picture of the whiteboard after our initial meeting. We decided amongst all our tables, we had 5 in common from the databases. The main ones were, for our particular CA, was patients, which was our child, medication, which was our immunisation, and healthcare professionals, in our case the GP practice. So appointments was common between Team Velocity and James and Mairead and Elvira's group, and then symptoms was shared again between Team Velocity and their group. So then we sat down and prepared prepared an overall schema for this to give us again another roadmap and make sure that we had all our elements in line. That's very small, so we've broken it down, and I'll point out the tables that we were able to incorporate. So we have our patient table again here. So this is the child, as you can see, is our patient. For our project, we were able to pick out and share the first name, last name, date of birth and sex. So we didn't have address, phone, email or PPS number in this particular one because it just didn't suit our table. We'd probably go back and change our database for CA3 to incorporate more details. The second one here is medication. So in our case, this would have been immunisations. So important for us was the name, the age due and the quantity. Also, appointments we weren't able to share, so the other groups had that information. Symptoms again, the other groups, that was a very small one. Healthcare professionals was our GP. So we had first name. In hindsight, we should have had first name and second name. We had, I think, phone number and address. So qualification we didn't have. And then you can see here at the very bottom our route, we're closing our end tags for our route patients. Okay, so just to run through the rules again, what we agreed between us and sat down and agreed this at the initial meeting, and then at every iteration of the DTD we improved upon this and double validated our rules. So the order of the child elements must match the order defined in the element declaration. With each iteration of our DTD, we needed to double check this because the order was very, very important. Our modifying symbols were entered to allow when we agreed which of the elements we were to include, as in one or more of the item or zero or more of the items. So for example, in the patient element, each group had to have a first name and a last name. Didn't have to have a date of birth necessarily, or an address, or a phone, or an email, or a PPS number, or sex, or medications, appointments, symptoms, healthcare professionals. Then we exchanged the XML documents. So I have a sample here of the code we received from James, Mairead, Elvira and Miles Group. So this is we were able to accept. They actually just shared a patient and appointment and healthcare professional here. So we were able to take in patient and healthcare professional into ours. We weren't able to incorporate appointment because that wasn't one of the files that we had, or one of the fields that we had. And then this is an extract of what we were able to send. So we were able to send patient, healthcare professional and medications to the other teams. So we sent that to the two teams. I don't have team velocities here on this handout. But they were able to share healthcare professionals and patient with us. So now some of the advantages of XML and the interoperability of it and how it helped us with this CA and in general. XML is very easy to read and understand, and it uses human language. So for example, it's quite obvious that there's a patient, there's a healthcare professional, you have control over the tag names, they're readable. They convey the meaning, so you don't have to be an expert coder to understand it. So you can read it like a file, and if there was any ambiguity over what we were agreeing, we were able to go back to our group straight away. So it meant, as a group, we could write the tags to suit ourselves, and it could be understood, because rather than writing GP or being specific, we all agreed we'd call it healthcare professionals. So that was very helpful. Compatibility. As Kira mentioned in our presentation, we only know Java, so this is terrific for us because it's specific to Java, and we can work on individual computers, so we can work remotely, although as a team and in different environments. For example, it can use it's perfectly accessible on different platforms. Mark has an Apple, we have PCs, we have laptops. You can view the files on an iPad. Not every member of our group uses the same platform, so it's very accessible. It supports multilingual documents, which wasn't really an issue for us, but it could be an issue. And again, it just shows us the advantages of using XML, as all users and people in our group, in the class even, don't have English as their first language. Extensibility, it's extendable, so there's no fixed set of tags. So if we had forgotten something in our 7th iteration, it wasn't too late to add it in. You're not limited, things can be added and omitted as you want. Again, the tags used are using the natural language and relative to that domain, so they're very understandable and they make sense to everybody. It's possible to embed existing data. This was particularly advantageous for this CA because due to inexperience and the restrained time limit we were under, all the groups were working from the same database platform, and it aided us all in making our applications interoperable. Facilities, the comparison and aggregation of data. So the tree structure of XML documents, similar to our schema, can be compared and aggregated efficiently, element by element. So it's very easy to group elements. It was very useful in the CA for the validation process and determining what issues arose, and anything that transpired that infringed the rules we were able to spot very easily. If there is an issue with it upon the validation process, the prompt jumps to the tag where the issue has arisen, and it's very clear what went wrong and how you can address it and fix it and get it rolling again. Some opportunities for improvement. Agreeing with DTD, as we said, there were eight iterations over 3 weeks, but because we were validating our own code, which we were comfortable with, until we actually started exchanging XML files in the last couple of days, that's when the problems arose. So if we had reached that stage earlier, it would have been more apparent. So it wouldn't have been as, I don't think there would have been as many iterations. Deciding what data we could actually share among groups was a problem. We thought 5 tables was great at the beginning, but then what we could actually share, and within those tables what we could actually share, turned out to be different. And then we were limited by what data we could read from the other 2 groups. Although we might have been able to share patient and healthcare professional, within patient and healthcare professional, we may have only been able to share or read 2 fields or 3 fields, which wasn't a whole lot. Issues with the database tables, again, there was a lot of work went into, I suppose, fixing the database table to address the null values, the auto increment, the primary keys, and the restraints that they imposed. And that only became apparent when, again, we started coding and things weren't validating. We had to just go back and fix things iteratively. So that took a lot of time. So now I'm going to demonstrate code. John, I just had a look at the time there, and I'm at 14 minutes 10 seconds, so I'm going to do the demo in a second one in case I get cut off, okay? Alright, so I'll name the files 2 different things for you.